This weekend was the first round of the Ark of Osiris Grand Prix. This is the best players in the world duking it out with completely even accounts. They all have access to the exact same building blocks, all max commanders, 5 sets of every single piece of equipment, and more. And when you watch these players and you see which teams are winning, there are some huge takeaways for what you should be doing in Ark of Osiris gameplay. So stick around in this video for the things you must learn to get more wins in Ark, learning from the masters. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and today's video is sponsored by the makers of Rise of Kingdoms. And there is so much we can learn from the Ark of Osiris League gameplay this weekend that I thought I have got to make a video about this. Now, I was casting it and invited as a caster on the official Rise of Kingdoms channel, but let's talk about the takeaways here, and some of these you would have heard me mention in the official cast. But I'm going to just start with a banger, which is that core to what garrison you use, what civilization you use, what you use in the field. Guess what, baby? March speed is everything. Now, this is actually a pretty easy idea to understand, and we're going to start by looking at how this influences your civilization choice. But if you can march faster, then you can do more things. You can actually have more troops in more places because you spent less time walking and you spent more time actually being where the action is. Now, this is also important because Ark of Osiris is very much about coordination. And in a world in which now we don't have perfect vision of the enemy side of the map, you need to be able to react. And the only thing that can reduce your reaction time once you get vision of something is to be able to march there faster. So there's a ton of implications here. And the first thing I need to say is pretty much every single player I saw, almost without exception, is using Ottoman. Now, this is funny because people aren't actually running that many archer marches, and I'll talk about that more in just a minute. But they run Ottoman not for the 5% archer health, although a rally lead rallying with archers might benefit from that, but for the march speed and the 5% active skill damage. Pretty much every commander being used is doing skill damage, with the exception of Liu Chat, and we'll talk about that more in just a bit. But the Ottoman Empire is what everybody is using. And this really calls, I think, into major attention the fact that we don't actually have a cavalry civilization with some march speed, right? Like, we've got Germany, which is arguably one of the best civilizations in the game when you're not fighting, because you enjoy the training speed and the AP recovery, and hey, for barbing, the Cav special unit is great. And so I would say that if the developers released a civilization, a Cav civilization with march speed, oh my god, let me tell you, I mean, it would be what everyone uses. Hands down, march speed and the extra stats from having the special unit, yeah, everyone would use a Cav Civ if it was available. So there's really 2 types of Cav Civs that we're missing right now, which is kind of surprising. First of all, we're missing that March Speed Cav Civ, and then second of all, we're missing like a proper garrison cavalry civilization. We don't have one. We have a rally civilization in the form of Arabia. So if you wanted to rally Cavs, you definitely would be Arabia here for the 5% all damage. That's actually pretty big. You've got Byzantium for 5% health, but the hospital cap does not matter for Ark, not at all. You've got Spain with experience gain and resource production, also not relevant for Ark. So you really don't have a great option for cavalry, and we'll talk more about why that matters. In fact, let's do it right now. So since cavalry march faster, cavalry become a primary choice for almost everything you do in Ark if you can swing it. So we can see this, by the way, if you look at the information for a cavalry unit. The march speed is a base of 80 for a Royal Knight, whereas an archer, the base march speed, I clicked the wrong thing here, is going to be, gotta be careful, don't delete your troops. Base march speed is 70, and for an infantry unit, it's even lower, 65. So cavalry get places faster. So your civilization choice is impacted for the march speed boost and the skill damage dealt, but your garrison choice is basically determined off of the fact that cavalry go everywhere faster, so we should just make a cavalry-based garrison. So the garrison that was used almost exclusively is a garrison you don't see as much in KVK, because I don't actually think it's as good, and that's Jan Žižka. And you don't actually care that it's not the best garrison captain primary in the world, because you just need to get to the garrison. And if you put troops in the garrison, hey, you might live. And if you can get there, that's the whole thing. So Jan Žižka primary with Hera secondary. The Hera is designed to make it so you can put kind of whatever other troops in the garrison that you bring, which is good. So Jan Žižka Hera was the primary garrison that we saw. And we could talk about this a little bit, but before I do, if you're getting value from this video so far, consider smashing that subscribe button and throwing a like on the vid. Also, of course, I've got timestamps in here. So if there's something you want to jump to, you can use those timestamps to navigate. So Jan Žižka is doing a couple things. Big damage factor if you're being dealt with, if you're dealing with a rally, but also some area of effect damage, which is nice. And that's like your main concern. You do take less normal attack damage. That's fine. But the big thing you're doing is you're getting to the garrison fast, and Hera really makes sure that you live. So Heraclius has amazing shielding. And shielding is so good in Ark of Osiris. You're almost certainly using a lucky coin, by the way, because the shield triggers there are fantastic when you're getting swarmed. And also there's synergy over here to deal some damage back to the enemies once every 8 seconds. That's a minor synergy. You're really just there for survival. So your garrison choice is Jan Žižka with Hera, but the backup garrison, if you do get crazy swarmed, is ideally Hera with YSS. Now, this is a garrison we've seen really shine with the addition of the leadership gear into the game, but a part of what makes Hera YSS work is the shield synergy and the really high counterattack damage. YSS makes it so that you will periodically get a shield when you're getting swarmed and boost your counterattack by 30%. And you can put any troop you want in the garrison, which is exactly the situation you have in Ark. Whoever's there needs to be able to get in and have it be advantaged. So Jan Žižka Hera is your garrison primarily, especially if they're rallying. But Hera YSS is what you use against a swarm. And if you're already subscribed to the channel, you knew that Hera YSS was a good anti-swarm, but weak to rallies, because I covered the best garrisons in the game just a couple days ago. Card will be up in the top if you missed that video. Now, the reality is that most people aren't going to be a garrison captain, right? So they want to know, what should I be using in the field, Chisgule? And this is where the insights really kick up for what we were observing in the Osiris Grand Prix. And it seemed like a lot of people were using 3 or 4 cavalry marches in the open field. I mean, cavalry were everywhere. So what 3 cavalry were being used? Well, first of all, of course, Nevsky is there. Your first cavalry march includes Nevsky and Joan, of course, but not in that order. You actually use Joan primary with Nevsky secondary. Now, this is something that I feel like 1V really pioneered as a strategy, at least in the international servers, where they were constantly running Joan with Nevsky, and you had 60GT running Nevsky with Joan. And the big advantage of the Joan primary is specifically this talent, Hasty Departure. You get a 60% march speed boost for 10 seconds when you leave a city. Look, let's say you're trying to reinforce an altar that's getting rallied and swarmed. The march speed could be the difference between you're getting there or not. It is a big deal. And in a world where you try to take structures on the enemy's side of the map, to have this extra march speed, especially if you micromanage leaving caravans to get a little boost every now and then, this is a big deal in getting to places faster. So Joan primary with Nevsky secondary is your first Cav march. Your second Cav march is Huo paired with William. pretty obvious, actually. I've made dedicated videos about the best open field combos, so it's unsurprising that our first two marches includes these commander choices. Card will be up in the top in case you missed the best open field pairings in the game. But then there's a third pairing they use. And the third pairing they use is a cavalry pair. They use XY with Justinian. Now, Justinian doesn't really do the overwhelming majority of what he's there to do from like a beating a garrison standpoint, right? Like the active skill gets better if you're leading a rally attack, okay? He's going to take less normal attack damage, but that's mostly beneficial in a rally context. But Justinian is good enough that you use him in the open field because he's the hardest hitting cavalry commander you have available. Better than Saladin, better than Honda Tadakatsu, which, by the way, some people were even using, on top of the marches I've already described, a fourth cavalry march, Saladin Honda Tadakatsu, which is like really not an amazing combination when you actually look at the synergy of these commanders. But if all you care about is getting places and you've got unlimited equipment, hey, like, it's technically not unlimited. It's 5 sets of every single piece of equipment for the players in this tournament, but we'll talk more about this in a minute. The implication here, however, for all players is that if you want to be good at Ark, consider running in your 5-march murder ball or more 3 cavalry marches. Look, I've got an account, my restart account. It's 3 infantry, 1 archer, 1 cavalry. I've advocated very heavily that everyone should have a march of each troop type to take advantage of the best of whatever that troop type can bring. But you can go with either a 2-2-1 or a 3-1-1 configuration. That's the number of marches you have of each troop type. And it seems like, especially if you run 6 or 7 marches, if you can prioritize having 3 cavalry marches, that will benefit you profoundly in Ark. But there's actually a proper 4th cavalry march that people were running. And, you know, I swear, I literally made a video. I'm like, guys, Trajan is still good. And not only is he still good, but I actually used him in the open field on my restart account. And I was like, wait a minute. I took him out of my lineup, used 5 DPS instead of 4 DPS in a Trajan march. And I was like, wow, actually, I do way better with the Trajan march with 4 DPS and a support than a 5 DPS configuration. The reports were just better. And it's the opposite of everybody said. Now, I'm not going to rehash my video about this topic. Card will be up in the top where I explain in depth why Trajan freaking slaps still. But what were they using in Ark Grand Prix? Well, they used Aethel Primary with Trajan. I literally made this video years ago where I was like, hey guys, Aethel with Trajan is being used all over the place for Ark winning teams. And they're still doing it. So why is that? Well, first of all, there are benefits to having mixed troops in Aethel Trajan. And they don't even bring the mixed troops. They literally bring full cavalry. Why would you do that? Well, you bring full cavalry to march faster. As I said at the start of this video, if you learn anything, it's that march speed is everything. So, Aethel Trajan, big march speed. By the way, the museum buff on Aethel gives 20% march speed, right? Something like that. A lot of march speed. Trajan gives march speed. So you run super fast to where you're going. You have extra troop capacity from the Trajan. So if you're reinforcing garrisons, like, yeah, you could throw that in the garrison. It's got extra troops, right? And the Aethel Trajan is just really strong. It lives a long time. It does great damage. I will not revisit why the damage factor on Aethel is amazing. Spoiler alert, it doesn't reduce when the number of targets goes up, whereas other active skills, like Esong, for example, more targets means less damage per target technically, but more total damage. I made a full video about that. Card will be in the end screen for that one and a card up top. Holy cow. So you're bringing potentially 4 cavalry marches if you're also running the Aethel Trajan. Now, I don't think every single player is running Aethel Trajan, by the way, in Ark. I think they're having a select number of players, but a non-trivial number of players, like half of them, maybe, bringing the Aethel Trajan, maybe a third, somewhere in that range, 1/3 to 50%, I think. So, okay, march speed is everything. Got it, Chisgule. But what about the non-cavalry combos that people are bringing? I mean, you had to bring something that was not a cavalry march at some point, right? And yes, there are other marches that were used. I, in a previous video, said that I thought Skippy Prime with Liu Che was the best infantry march in the game. And guess what? The winning teams, when they bring their one infantry march, at least in the matches I spectated, it was Skippy Prime with Liu Che. That's what they ran around the field with. So if you are going to bring infantry, I think that's the one infantry march you bring, if you're only bringing one. From here, we need to talk about the Archer March. And there were a couple ways this was run. One is Boudica primary, Zhuge Liang secondary. The other way is the Zhuge Liang is the primary, and Boudica Prime is the secondary. And the reason you would use Zhuge Liang as the primary is that you really want to get this debuff applied as quickly as you can. Reduce the damage of 5 targets by 15%. Hell freaking yeah. That's why you make them the primary. You don't get the advantage of the Boudica skill damage taken debuff on the target and then hit them with AoE damage. So, like, in KVK, I still think you use Boudica as the primary, I think, right? Like, it's just weird. In KVK, you care more somehow about the damage than you do about the damage mitigation and, like, area of effect stuff. It's a little weird, because when you think about your KVK fights, it should be the same. It's very funny. We'll talk about this more in just a bit. So anyways, Boudica, Zhuge Liang, or Zhuge Liang with Boudica, that's the one Archer March you bring if you're going to be bringing an Archer March. And I think, generally, that 3-1-1 configuration is pretty good, but it seemed like when people were shedding a march, it was actually the infantry they were shedding because they're the slowest in order to bring the Aethel Trajan, I think. Okay, I think. I'm not actually on these teams, so I couldn't tell you with 100% certainty that that's what they were doing. So there's obviously a lot of commanders that don't see gameplay, but might be brought in for like niche plays. Like, for example, one Sargon would definitely help a Garrison Swarm quite significantly. More than I think a Liu Che would, I think. I mean, having one anyways is big. There's commanders that you might see show up periodically, although I didn't see it. But like Tommy, for example, for a Garrison Swarm, which is the thing you're doing in Ark, is pretty good, right? Rallies were occasionally, Nevsky with Justinian. You saw Henry with Zhuge Liang. And there was like one Tariq ibn Ziyad with Pakal, but I found that to be a head scratcher because the problem with Pakal is that it's anti-swarm, but you need DPS to crank fast to flip the garrison and make sure you win. You just need to kill the garrison fast. You don't need troops left over when it happens. And, look, if they swarm you, they swarm you, but you gotta kill the garrison fast. That's my philosophy on taking garrisons in Ark. So there is a lot that we learned here, right? If we step back and say, what does this mean for me? A couple things that we talked about. First of all, we know for KVK that Ottoman civilization's really good. So if you care about Ark, then consider a civ swap for Ottoman civilization. Very strong. If you have the flexibility of, influencing what garrisons you go for, if you really care about Ark, become a Cav garrison main, right? If you really care, you either make some leadership gear, all right? And you hope they continue to release leadership garrisons that will be meta for Ark, or you just invest in cavalry gear, way safer than a leadership invest, and you go for whatever fresh Cav garrison shows up, and you just use it. That would be your game plan. Right now, it's Jan Ziska with Hera, okay? For field, consider moving into 3 sets of equipment for cavalry, if that's a thing that you can afford to do. I got 3 sets of infantry. I could make a 8th set of equipment that's oriented toward cavalry, but I don't know if I'm going for 8 sets of equipment. It's real expensive, really expensive. Maybe at some point, but also at some point, to what extent is it worth having slightly weaker equipment, but having the cavalry? I mean, that probably ends up being worth at some level of competition here, okay? And the final big takeaway is, look, Trajan's really, really, really good still. And so is Aethel, by the way. So the question that leaves me with, and I'll let you all start to ponder this, is why is it that we don't see as much Aethel and Trajan in KVK? I mean, if they're literally everywhere in Ark, and these are the best teams in the world competing for major prizes, that's what they use. Why not use it in KVK? Is it because people don't want to crit cavalry gear for leadership? I would understand that. I crit a bunch of leadership gear back before the leadership set existed. Now I'm in an awkward position. I hope the developers will, at some point, get a look at equipment here. We know that an equipment change is on the way, but it's taking longer than we expected, which makes me wonder, are we in store for something cool? Something better than what they promised? Something different? I don't know. We'll see what we ultimately get. I'm looking forward to it, though. I'm optimistic. If you want to see the vid where the developers indicated, hey, big changes are coming to the equipment system, I was in a special meeting where we got to talk about that. Card will be in the end screen. I hope you check that out. Alternatively, as I was describing earlier, gosh, there are so many videos. I mean, just tap the little info button in the upper right, and you can see all the videos, but another card in the end screen in just a second as to why Aethel Trajan is what Ark champions are using, and why that works so well in ways you may not have expected.